This meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome everybody. So great to have Teresa Mitchell here from Mountain Masala. Here we are doing another Meadow at Home. Get ready to take advantage of just living our best lives. And our theme for last month and this month is health and well-being. And so as part of that, I just thought, let's invite Teresa to come and teach us about Indian cooking because it's so full of so much goodness. So I'm really excited for this session. I feel like we've been talking about it for a long time. And I'll hand it over to you, Teresa. I'm Tracy. If any of you need any help or have any questions, just go ahead and put it in the chat.
Thanks, Tracy. Can everyone see the home screen that says tutorial by Teresa Mitchell? Is everybody good with that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just a quick little user-friendly option up in the right-hand corner where you might see a series of options for your video box for the live speaker. I would suggest you reduce that down so you get as much of the screen as possible. So that's just a little user hint. So let me just start by introducing myself. My name is Teresa Mitchell. I have been in the Valley for, 12 and a half years now, almost 13. And I am formerly one of the co-owners of the Rocking Horse Bakery in Winthrop, where I'm guessing I probably have met many of you. And in addition to running the bakery, I also ran my spice business as Meadow Masala. And I ran that for the duration of our time with the bakery and I both used my spice blends and a lot of our bakery items, and I also packaged those spices for retail sale at the bakery. So, but that wasn't the beginning of my exploration into Indian food, Indian cooking, and the spice world. I actually started producing spices about, my daughter is 22, so I guess it's been almost 22 years since I first started when our family lived in Chico, California, and I was producing the same spice blends that I produce today and selling them at farmers market. So how does this blonde hair, blue-eyed white woman get into Indian cooking? It started back in the late 80s with a long, an extended journey in India, where I spent time just immersing myself in the culture and of course the food, and fell in love with the place, the flavors, the healthfulness of the food. And so that was really the starting point. From there, I met my husband and concurrently met the woman who is now my closest and oldest friend, who was born in Punjab. And she taught me a whole lot about Indian home cooking. And in fact, the recipes that we have today are rooted in her culture, and so they're very familiar to me. I've had these dishes a million times, and so they're very much Indian home food, home style cooking, and also are pretty popular as street food in India. And then of course I have two children who were born in India, so making Indian food in our home now is a real part of how we maintain that connection to their birth culture. My kids are both grown now. One still lives at home and one has flown the coop, but he is still very, very much appreciative of Indian food and Indian cooking. So he is the beneficiary of a lot of my spice blends and recipes. So so that's kind of a quick little background. Before we launch into the actual instruction, I just wanted to get a sense of where everyone was at as far as their intention with tonight or this afternoon's tutorial. How many of you, you can just raise your hand if you're on video, how many of you were planning on actually cooking along with the course? Okay, a few people are. Okay. Okay, so a handful of people are. So I will just be really transparent. This is a new medium for me for cooking. I normally do cooking classes live and in person. And so we can really pace ourselves according to the live group. This is going to be a little bit different for me. And in fact, when I created this tutorial, it's not necessarily timed in real time. So there are a couple of steps that are going to take a whole lot longer than what the video allows for. So what I'm going to try and do is pause the video and we can talk a little bit about what we're doing. But while we're pausing, if you're, for example, waiting for your onions to brown, which is probably the longest step in this entire thing, you don't want to stop that process just because we're still talking, because that is going to take a minute. It takes probably 15 minutes to get our onions as brown as we want them for this recipe. So, and I have a video that will show you our goal to help with that process. But I just wanted to let everyone know that we're going to be kind of pausing in places to help the actual live cooking move along. So I'm hoping that those of you who are cooking tonight have your ingredients out and available, so that we don't have to delay that part of the process. If not, I would suggest that maybe we get into that, maybe you grab things now if you don't have them already set out. So any questions before we launch into the instruction?
And just so everyone knows, I did go through, there was some background noise and I did go and mute folks. So go ahead and unmute if you have a question or put it in the chat.
Okay, it looks like we're good to go. Gonna reduce my screen. And if you have any questions, I would suggest, like Tracy said, to go ahead and use that chat, which Tracy will be monitoring. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get us going here. And there we go.
Are you gonna read to us? Uh-oh, are we frozen? No, okay.
Nope, we're not frozen, Tracy. I just wanted to give everybody a quick little chance to read that on their own. And then I'm also going to just let you know that this dish, this chole dish, as I said before, is a very typical Punjabi dish, vegetarian dish. It is traditionally made with ghee, which is not considered vegetarian. So if you're, or I'm sorry, it's not considered vegan. So if you are going for a vegan option, you can use any kind of neutral oil that you'd like for this dish. This dish was first introduced to me many years ago through a wonderful cookbook that I don't believe is in publication any longer. It's Madhu Jaffrey's vegetarian cooking book, and I can get the title to Tracy. So it's it's one of my favorites, and I know you can buy it used. I've seen it at Powell's online, in fact, with their used books. So it's a really great option. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. And what we're going to do is go through the ingredients we'll go ahead and just start, and I'll pause as needed.
We just have one question to start.
Sure.
How do we pronounce this again?
Chole.
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 Great.
Yep. I know Don, I think, butchered it on the radio. Don Ashford was making a public service announcement, and I think he called it Coley or Chloe or something like that. So anyway, it's called chole. Okay, here we go. So the first ingredient we have is ghee, which is a clarified butter. And it has a number of health benefits, including really great sources of vitamin A, D, and K. It has all kinds of antioxidants. It's a great source of healthy fats. Again, those antioxidants have some wonderful anti-inflammatory effects. It has high concentrations of omega-3s, and it's considered to be a healthy fat. Like any fat, you want to be cautious about how often you use it, and how much, but it is considered to be healthy. It is lactose free. So for folks who have some lactose or dairy sensitivity, it can often be a good option as a healthy fat. There are lots and lots more Ayurvedic properties of ghee that I haven't gone into here, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea of some of those health benefits. So the next ingredient will be onions. I like to use yellow onions for Indian cooking. And of course, onions have all kinds of amazing properties, including all kinds of vitamins and potassium, all kinds of flavonoids and antioxidants, great source of prebiotics for healthy gut. There's some interesting research being done about the association of consuming onions and improved bone mineral density. So they're also an antibacterial, a natural antibacterial, and high in nutrients, low in calories. And they're very inexpensive. It's a great, great base. And it's really, onions are the base for almost all of the aromatics, or the beginning parts of many Indian dishes. They're at the heart of what I call a wet masala. So masala is a mixture of anything, really, but particularly spices. The onion, garlic, ginger combination is something that I refer to as a wet masala, so a wet mixture. Next up is garlic, of course. We're looking for about 8 to 10 cloves of garlic. It depends on the size of your garlic. And again, these are just chock-a-block full of nutrition. So including manganese and vitamin C and B6. Again, they have all kinds of great health properties, including reducing LDL cholesterol, or the bad cholesterol, improving blood pressure, antioxidants, bone health, the whole garlic in your chicken soup. Wives' tale is not untrue. Adding garlic is an incredibly healthy option.
So Teresa, as we're going through these slides, maybe our chefs out there can be, getting their onions and garlic prepped kind of thing.
For sure. So next up, I've got the 3 tablespoons of the aromatic curry masala and 3/4 cup of diced tomatoes. So tomatoes are another terrific ingredient with lots of health properties, including lycopene, which is a really powerful anti-inflammatory. Sorry about that. I'll go back a little bit. I don't know what happened there.
Teresa, can I ask you something about what's going on in my kitchen?
Yeah.
Would you say like a medium heat or low, or for the onions with the ghee?
So I would definitely go low. You want to go low and slow with your onions. You don't want to burn them, which will happen really quickly, especially the ones that get up on the edge, the side of your pan. So you want to go, that's a part of why it takes a while. So you want to get your oil, your ghee pretty hot, and add your onions. You want a pretty small dice, not minced, but a small dice. And we're going to get to the size, but if you want to jump on that, Jennifer, then just
I
start.
already started it, but I just didn't know if I should have it hot or.
Yeah, I would go. Is that I'm sorry, I can't tell what kind of surface you have there.
It's a cast iron, like a Dutch.
Right. What kind of flame do you have there?
Oh, electric.
Okay. Yeah, you probably can go a little bit higher. I use a gas range. And so I have to be really careful about burning them. But the general rule of thumb is you want to go lower heat. You could probably notch it up to something like a medium low. And if it starts to feel like it's smoking or getting too hot, then turn it down a bit.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Yeah, and if anybody else has any questions as we're going along, please feel free to interrupt. This is all, just I'm hoping helpful information about why we're using the ingredients that we're using. Okay, next up, we've got our chickpeas. And again, I am suggesting that you use canned chickpeas. They are much easier and faster. But if you prefer to start with the dry chickpeas, there's a ratio of chickpeas to water, and it's something that you need to prepare in advance of this recipe. So it's about a cup of dried chickpeas that are rinsed and then soaked for about 8 hours. And then you'll want to cook them in fresh water with a little bit of salt until they're very, very tender. If you're using canned chickpeas, a fun fact, in case you didn't know, there's the liquid from the chickpea is a vegan alternative to egg whites. If you are interested in trying your hand at making some meringue or something like that, it's called aquafaba, and it is a vegan option that whips up much like an egg white does. So chickpeas are a fantastic ingredient. They have a low glycemic index, really high in fiber. Again, they can help to lower cholesterol. They have all kinds of other vitamins and minerals that are important for a healthy diet. And they also have protein in them, which is a terrific vegan option. All right. Next up, we have some paprika, a couple of teaspoons. And paprika, like a lot of peppers, are loaded with all kinds of great things, including antioxidants. That was a really fast screen. I apologize for that. And again, this video will be available for you to look at after the fact. So then we have some salt. A teaspoon is what I like to start with. And about a tablespoon of lemon juice. It's fine if you want to use jarred juice. And I like to have a couple of hot chilies. I definitely seed my chilies and then mince them. And then we want about a 1-inch slit piece of ginger. Ginger is yet another one of those terrific ingredients with lots of healthful properties. Everything from slowing down bacterial growth to all kinds of digestive health. I oftentimes drink ginger tea in the evenings if I have any kind of belly upset. All right, so we're going to be prepping next, but before I launch into the prep, any questions about any of the ingredients?
Teresa,
Teresa,
it's Leanne.
what about-
I'm wondering what kind of chilies you use, because there's so many.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I use what I can access locally or what I've grown in my garden. So I grow a number of different hot chilies in my garden, but because of where we live, my preferred chili is a Serrano chili. It's got a nice flavor. But if I can't find those, then honestly, I will use a jalapeno. And I just adjust according to our taste buds. A lot of people believe that more is better. I think less is better because I also love a good condiment. So I make my own Indian pickles and chutneys that we always bring out to add heat. And that way everybody at the table can enjoy the meal. With this dish, I find I actually used 2 fairly slender, I can't remember what type of chilies they are now that you're asking me. They were similar to a cayenne, but something that I grew in my garden here. And I just would suggest that you seed them and scrape those seeds out and then mince them very, very finely. So, does that help, Leanne?
Oh, yeah, yep, because I grow a whole bunch of chilies too, and I didn't know. I mean, I just used jalapeno or a green chili.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
totally fine, honestly.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. And even, I mean, I've even used dried chilies, like flaked chili in this dish,
Mhm.
and it works fine. But fresh chili is just always so nice. So and I have a bunch in my freezer, so that's what I used.
Yeah.
Any
I
other
think we
questions?
also had, yeah, Judith had a question too.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Therese, what would you consider to be a neutral oil?
A neutral oil would be something like canola, or oh, let's see. Well,
Coconut.
Canola is my go-to. I have also used a very light olive oil, if that's your preference. I wouldn't use extra virgin. It's just a little too extra virgin-y. It's got a lot of flavor, and so it's not a flavor profile that really kind of goes with this dish. You don't really want that to be the overwhelming flavor. I've also used a combination of of canola and some ghee, or even canola and butter if my ghee is low. So, yep.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? All right, well, we're going to go ahead and jump into prepping. Now I like to have all my ingredients out and ready to go. So, fun fact, when you are cutting into an onion, if you go from stem to root, it actually will really help reduce the whatever the byproduct is that makes you cry. So I tend to do, that's how I tend to prepare my onions. And then I am, in this demonstration, I am using just my butcher block and a knife, but I will tell you that if you want a shortcut, you can zap your onions in a Cuisinart or another type of food processor. You can actually do that with all of the items that we're prepping. I would just highly recommend that you do them separately, because your onions really do need to cook on their own at the very beginning of this recipe. So you don't want to throw everything in all at once, all of your items that you're mincing. Next up, we have garlic. My favorite trick with garlic, I don't use a garlic press because I feel like I leave most of it in the press. I use the side of my big blade and smash those cloves, and then I come back and do a mince with my knife. And it's, you don't have to worry about being teeny with this recipe, because it does cook down pretty nicely. So you'll end up with I mean, it's still chunky, but you're not going to have big bits of raw onions or garlic, because it really does kind of meld together beautifully. This was local garlic. This is the last of my local garlic from this last year. So I was very happy to have that beautiful sweet garlic. Then we've got a little piece of ginger. I probably use more than an inch, but if you don't already know this trick, you can use the edge of a spoon to peel your ginger, and it produces the least amount of waste. Again, I tend to use a knife to mince my ginger. A ginger grater is certainly another option. But I feel like I leave a lot of the ginger on the grater. And so I like to, this is my little ginger grater, but it kind of just stays there. Option one, or you can do it like I do it. I do like little thin matchsticks, and then I come back and I mince from there. And I actually don't mind biting into a piece of ginger. I love the taste of it. And in this dish in particular, it works really, really well. So that's my matchstick. And when I'm cooking other kinds of cuisine, noodle bowls, etc., I sometimes leave it that big because I really like it. And a good sharp knife is really helpful. Next up, we have some chilies. These are chilies that were left over from my garden harvest from this last year. They were in the freezer, so they're really soft, and I can just slit them down the middle and then scrape those seeds out. You can leave the seeds in if you like things extra hot. I like things that have some warmth to them, but I don't want to, sometimes the seeds kind of bother my belly, so I like to take them out and keep it to the sweet fruit. I also sometimes don't like the texture of those seeds in my dish. And again, a super simple mince is great on your chilies. Just be careful you don't touch your eyes. I oftentimes, if I'm doing a lot of prep, or if I was at the bakery, I would wear gloves when I would do this process. So there's our prepped veg. Any questions on the prep? All right. Well, now we get to see the cooking part. So first off, we're going to heat up the oil or the ghee in a good heavy bottomed pan. And we'll be adding those onions to that nice hot oil. And again, we're just doing the onions to start with. Our ginger and our garlic tend to burn if we try and cook them all at once. So we want to add those in a little bit later in the process. And you can see the sizzle, it's starting. I like to spread them out just a little bit so they're evenly placed on the bottom of the pan. And then one of the things that I like to suggest is that you don't touch them for a while. Let them go ahead and start to brown, that first level of browning. And you'll kind of see along the edge when the edge of the pan, when they just start to brown. And this is where I start to go ahead and stir them. And you can see I've already got some dark bits. That's what we're going for. We're going for not necessarily uniform, but more uniform, nice, rich, dark brown. And this strategy adds so much flavor to this dish and any other wet masalas that you're making. So here we go. We can see we're getting a little bit closer to that brown. And I'm going to pause right there because I'm guessing that not everyone's onions are as brown as we would like them to be.
We have a great question here from Cheryl about what side dishes would you recommend
with the chole? So chole can be a side dish on its it can be served with if you are a meat eater, it's delicious with something like tandoori chicken or tandoori fish, because it adds some nice moisture to that, nice moisture balance. We are making the chutney, one of my favorite chutneys, with this particular dish as a part of this course. So we'll go ahead and we'll learn about that. So that's a delicious side. And then I love to make a very simple kachumber, which is basically it's tomatoes and cucumber salad. It's very simple. I just dice up cucumbers and tomato. And this is a delicious one for the end of summer when things are fresh and really ripe and delicious. In India, you would also see maybe some small red onions and sometimes some chilies in that combination as another side. Chole is such a great versatile dish. It can be served on top of rice. It can be served with naan or roti for a more complete meal. Oh gosh, it is, it can be just served on its own, obviously. I've actually made it a little wetter, so it's got more of a gravy or a curry. And then it's really, really nice over rice, where the rice kind of soaks up that yummy stuff. So I hope that helps.
One trick I've learned with my basmati rice that I love is from someone who wrote a little Indian cookbook, is I always put a bay leaf, and I cook my basmati with a bay leaf and some butter
Yep.
And it is so good like that.
Yep. And that's a great suggestion, Tracy. One of the things I do with my basmati, we call it yellow rice in our family. So I will oftentimes start with some ghee and throw maybe a teaspoon of whole cumin seed into that ghee and let that brown a little bit. And then I put my rinsed basmati into that delicious combination. And then I add probably a good tablespoon of turmeric. And it is a super simple, delicious way to just kind of add some color and certainly some healthful properties to your rice. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of garlic, some ginger. I mean, it kind of depends on what else I'm making, but it's a really nice, like you just said, it's a nice way to kind of jazz up your rice a little bit. But yeah, a bay leaf is a delicious option. I sometimes use curry leaves in my rice as well. So, all right, I just wanted to do a check-in to see how our onions were doing in real time. Do we still need another few minutes or a couple minutes on that, or can we continue on?
Mine are really translucent, but they're not that brown yet.
They're not that brown. Why don't you kick up the heat just a little bit, Jennifer, and see if that maybe you just want to watch them.
Okay.
You don't want them to burn. Anybody else need a little bit more time on their onions?
By the way, my husband Bill keeps coming and saying, that smells so good. And I'm like, it's just onions and ghee right now. It's not.
And it's the best smell ever, isn't it? Well, as soon as you add that garlic and ginger, he's going to be saying that even more.
I think that Judith raised her hand for a little bit more time. Yeah.
Okay.
Where are some of your special spots in India that?
So, well, Calcutta, because both of my children were born in Calcutta. So, and it was actually, ironically, the very first place I landed in India when I traveled as a young adult. So it's a very, very special place to me. It's also, has anyone else traveled in India by any chance? Anybody?
Yeah.
Looks like
Okay.
Judith and.
Yeah, so a few folks have. So if you've had the opportunity to go to someplace like Calcutta, Calcutta is actually the kind of the cultural center of India. So it has a high number of colleges and universities. Rabindranath Tagore, who is the poet laureate of India, is from Calcutta. There's terrific art and music and just incredible culture there, which and also a heavy kind of colonial impact as well. You see a lot of the British colonialism in Calcutta. So that's probably one of my most favorite and important places. I have spent time in Rajasthan, which is in the desert, the Thar Desert, in the very northwestern part of India. Very different culturally. The art from that part of India is amazing. It's got the whole Raj influence as well. So lots of old forts and castles and just an incredible place. And it's the desert, which I'm always fascinated by. I've spent a lot of time in Goa being a hippie, which is another terrific spot. Amazing seafood. Just an amazing, rich, very diverse culture there. Heavy Portuguese influence on the food. So a lot of the vinegary kinds of curries that you might find in an Indian restaurant would come from, might come in part from that kind of Portuguese influence in Goa. In the south of India, again, if there's meat on the diet, it's usually seafood. The South Indian food that I've experienced is about as hot as I've ever experienced. Like, it hurt to eat, and was amazing. So I feel fortunate to have had that opportunity too. in South India, there are these wonderful restaurants called thali restaurants, where you can go in and basically you get what's called a thali plate. And you've probably seen those if you've ever been to an Indian store, and some Indian restaurants use them as well, where they're stainless steel plates that have the little dividers for the different dishes. And it's basically an all you can eat thing. Back when I was traveling in India, it cost me about 50 cents for a thali dinner, which was extraordinary. So yeah, so I literally have been all the way around India. I've been to most of the really big cities, and I've been to some of the smaller cities. I've spent time in Varanasi, which is the holiest of Hindu places, and it's India is pretty incredible. I've wanted to go back for years and haven't made that happen, but hopefully it'll be on the horizon in the next 5 years or so for us. My daughter Neela is ready to go. She really wants to see the place of her birth. So we're hoping that will happen.
Fantastic.
Yeah. How are those onions, everyone? Thumbs up from Leanne. Ooh, we're getting there, Jennifer.
Okay, yeah, it looks good.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and move forward. I can always take another pause here if we need to. The next thing we're going to add into our onions will be the garlic. And just give that a stir. And we're not going to let our garlic brown the same way we did the onions, because it does get pretty bitter. So we don't want that to happen. We just like it to soften up a little bit before we add the next ingredient, which is the aromatic curry masala. I've got some really great health properties of the spices that I use that I'd be happy to share with Tracy, that she can then pass along to all of you. I didn't go into great detail with that, but I can assure you that the spice blends that I do are they're all salt-free, and they have lots of ingredients that are really healthful. Next up, we're going to add those tomatoes, and if you have any kind of sticky spots in your pan from the onions, those will generally be picked up when you add the tomatoes. I like to use canned tomatoes that are salt-free, so you can control the salt. And I also like to use diced tomatoes. I've also used tomato puree, which is totally fine, but you don't want tomato sauce. That's a little bit too thick.
Yeah,
So
Judith has a question.
Yes, Judith.
What was the spice you added? The aromatic curry masala?
It's the aromatic curry masala, correct.
Okay. 3 tablespoons. Whoa.
You can, yeah. So
not
I would
lemon juice.
suggest, Judith, if you want, you can start with less than that. Especially if you're adding any chilies to your dish.
Yeah,
If you're
I'm
not
adding
adding
the
chilies,
jalapeno.
then you're
I'm
probably going to be. Yeah, the 3, it's that's I like it pretty flavorful. And so the 3 works pretty well with this batch size, but if it makes you nervous, the heat part of it, you can come back a little bit. Maybe, you can start with 2 tablespoons. A lot of these recipes that I create are squishy on the spice part of it. It kind of depends on your taste buds. But this is a pretty good balance, the 3 tablespoons to that amount of chickpeas and other ingredients.
We have another question from Janet. Where do we get the spice that you just added? So
Sure. So the spices that we're using in most of the spice, well, all the spice blends are blends that I make through my Mountain Masala business. If you would like to order some from me, I have them in stock, and I'd be happy to fill an order for you, and we can do everything electronically, and then I can drop off an order for you. I use the Valley Goods store at Twistworks as my pickup point. In Twisp. If you live in Winthrop, we can maybe come up with another option, but that's kind of the constant for me. I work in Twisp some, so can make that happen. Other questions? Oh, and, oh, by the way, you can. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Did the lemon juice go in with the garam masala, with the aromatic curry
No.
masala?
No.
No, okay. I'm
Nope.
with you.
You're good to go. So if anybody wants to order spices from me, my I know Tracy has my email address, and it's
Yeah.
it's so she can
And
pass
I-
that on to you.
Yeah, and I did put it in, I sent out some emails that has Teresa's address in there to order the spice, so.
Yep.
Check your, if you didn't receive the emails, maybe it went into your promotions or something like that, so.
Yep. All right, with this dish, we like to let it cook for just a little bit. And then we're going to add our drained chickpeas. Both cans. And then we need to add a cup of water, which I know is, I don't believe is in the list of ingredients in your recipe. It's in the text for your recipe, but you'll want to have that cup of water in there to add enough moisture so that your masala, your wet masala doesn't burn. And that those chickpeas will absorb that gravy, that, you know, that liquid really nicely. So don't worry if it looks kind of soupy.
Can I ask something?
Absolutely.
So my tomatoes and onions are just cooking now. Would you say like maybe 5 minutes or something, or should I just go ahead and add the chickpeas?
Go ahead and add the chickpeas. They don't need to have a real long time. They're going to continue, the tomatoes will continue to break down. So go ahead and add your chickpeas and that cup of water. What I oftentimes do is I use the empty can for my chickpeas and fill it about halfway full. And that's about a cup, which is kind of how I cook. It's an ish.
That's the great thing with Indian cooking, or, you know, or so many different kinds of cooking. Once you like know the sort of like team of spices, you can just
Yep.
play.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, you know, that's one of the beautiful things about this recipe. We're using a recipe today, but know that you can tweak this in a lot of different ways. I mean, it would be tough if you decided to omit all of the onions, because clearly that's the base for this. But you can do more or less of other ingredients pretty effectively. So this dish is very similar to another dish that is called chana masala, which is frequently eaten in other parts of India. Chole is really a Punjabi thing. Chole has more tomatoes and has some other ingredients that are, but it's similar to chana masala, which is actually a type of dal. You've probably heard the term dal. And dal is basically a general term that refers to pretty much anything that's made with legumes is a dal. And so there are wet dals and dry dals. I've had so many different kinds of dals in India that you know are just so incredibly nutritious. You know, and if you're following a vegetarian or a vegan diet, dal is just such a great option. Dal with some rice. If you can get your hands on some brown basmati, I oftentimes will use brown basmati, which has some more healthful properties. I'm also a big fan of white basmati. I buy my white basmati in the Indian store on the west side. I like an extra long grain basmati that is very fragrant and delicious and cooks up just beautifully. So this dish doesn't necessarily need to be with rice because it's a little bit on the drier side. So wet dals, it's kind of nice to have that rice to soak up all that yumminess. All right. we're gonna go ahead and continue moving forward here. Our, once we have our chickpeas in water. And by the way, chickpeas and garbanzo beans are the same thing. Chickpeas are kind of what these are called in England. And because of the colonial, the empire in India, oftentimes the American term for chana is chickpea instead of garbanzo beans. We call them garbanzo beans in this country, but it's all the same. We're going to add that paprika, and that gives us this beautiful bright red color. And we're going to add the garam masala. And some salt.
With the paprika, there's so many different kinds of paprika, smoked or any
Right.
suggestions for that? Just whatever they have kind of. I like to buy stuff that go over, so.
Yeah, I do not. I've never used smoked paprika with this dish. It would just definitely impact the flavor profile. I think it would be a little bit overwhelming for this particular dish. So I wouldn't recommend using the smoked paprika. I go with sweet paprika, which is actually a really, really common ingredient in a lot of my spice blends as well. I always think of paprika as being more of an Italian or a Turkish ingredient, but it's used a lot in Indian cooking as well. That vibrant red color you can't beat. In fact, one of the blends that I make is a tandoori blend that is traditionally made with a chemical red dye, and I don't go for that. So instead, I use paprika to give it a little bit of that traditional red color. My tandoori is not as red as what you would find in an Indian restaurant, but it's going to be a whole lot healthier because that paprika has so many great healthful properties and is natural. All
Teresa, I
right.
have another question.
Sure.
Do you know the brand of the long basmati that you like to buy? Because I've been looking for one here and there isn't one here.
There isn't one here. No. And the brand that I usually go for is Royal.
Royal?
Yep. It's Royal or Royal India, but I buy 25-pound bags.
Yeah.
But if you can even find it on Amazon, you can just look up, extra long basmati. And you should be able to find it. The basmati that I use, each grain is about a ½ inch long. I mean, it's really long. But I love how it cooks up real, because I rinse it really well too. It's the individual kernels are really clear and pronounced, or the individual grains are really pronounced. And it's got a very nice chew to it. So
I had that before, and the Costco in Wenatchee did have a long grain basmati, but it was a 50-pound bag.
Yeah. And if you get to the west side, the Woodinville Costco has a terrific Indian selection. So I know I've bought ghee over there. I've bought all kinds of dal and other Indian ingredients. So, if you happen to be over in that area and you have a minute to stop at the Costco there, it's a great option.
We have a question from Jennifer. Did we add the salt and lemon juice?
We added the salt. We have not added the lemon juice yet. So we added the paprika, the garam masala, and the salt to our chickpea combination.
Teresa, do you have an Indian store that you recommend on the west side?
So I go for convenience and selection. There's a store that's called the Indian Supermarket, and there's one in kind of between Bellevue and Redmond, and there's also one in Portland that I go to. So they just have a terrific selection. I've been there enough so that I kind of know the aisles and it's predictable for me. So I really like them. My daughter and I were just over in Bellingham this fall and hit upon a couple of great small Punjabi stores that were kind of like convenience stores, but had a terrific selection and even had bulk spices. But they're more specific to North Indian, but it was really fun to find those. So yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't found anything in on the east side of the states. So I keep hoping that something would pop up in Spokane even. But so far nothing. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and move forward. So now we're going to be, so the lemon juice goes in after our salt. We're just going to give that a stir. And we're going to try and bring this back up to temperature. We want to keep it on that kind of medium low end of the scale. We don't want to scorch it. But we do want to get it hot enough so we start to see some little bubbles along the edges. And once we get it to that point, this is just bubbling, we're going to give it a, put a lid on it and let that cook for about 10 minutes or so. Basically, we're looking to, this is really, we're looking for 10 minutes if we were going to serve it in the next 15 minutes. Because we're going to be doing another recipe, I'm going to go ahead and have us continue. So those of you who are cooking live, just know that the last thing that we're going to add will be our chilies and our minced ginger. Okay. And that'll be after that 10 minutes or so. What I like to do after I add the chilies and the ginger, I like to leave the lid off for just a little bit, and let it, turn the heat way down. It's got that lovely sauce to it. We're going to go ahead and let some of that steam take care of that and thicken up just a little bit. And you can see that the chickpeas have actually pretty quickly absorbed that delicious juice, or the curry, which is the gravy. So there we've got our ginger and the chilies.
Putting them in
Give that a
now?
little stir.
No, and that goes in like 10 minutes, right, Teresa?
Yeah, you can. And you can add it earlier, but I would suggest you let it go ahead and cook for a little bit before you add those last ingredients. And then once you add those ingredients again, you're going to let it stay on a low heat for a little while and let that gravy get a little thicker.
Okay.
All right.
All
So
right, good job, everybody.
yeah, so let's just we're waiting for the chole to thicken up a little bit and to absorb all those flavors. Just a quick little thing about some of the language that we use around Indian food. You all, I'm sure, are familiar with the term curry. And there is an assumption or belief for many of us that curry is actually an ingredient. And in fact, curry is not an ingredient. In Indian cooking and in India, curry refers to gravy. So it's anything that has basically a sauce. Curry powder, which is what we most of us associate with curry, is actually an invention of the English. It's not even an Indian thing. And so it's, there's the Indian curry powder, that yellow powder that you can buy from McCormick's or whoever, is definitely was not a typical ingredient in India. That said, Indians tend to use a lot of different masalas in their cooking, and oftentimes they'll rely on a pre-made masala. So if you go to an Indian grocery store, for example, most of the larger Indian grocery stores will have an entire aisle dedicated to masalas. Now, the masalas that are made commercially in India tend to have monosodium glutamate and salt in them. And so, just be aware of that, but you can get all different kinds of masalas that are intended for specific dishes. When we talk about a curry plant or curry leaves, like we're going to be using in our next recipe, those are from a particular plant. It's a curry tree that grows primarily in Southeast Asia and South Asia. And it's a tree that has leaves. It's a smaller tree, and it has leaves that are very much like a bay leaf, not quite as waxy as a bay leaf or thick, but you know, I've seen curry plants grown in this country as house plants as well, and that leaf is used to flavor a lot of dishes, particularly in South India. There's a dish called sambar, which is similar to dal in that it uses legumes, lentils or another legume, and is used as a dip or is served on rice. And that is oftentimes flavored with curry leaves, fresh curry leaves or dried curry leaves, much like what we're using today. So let's see what else about
And the
talked a
word
little-
masala means mix, right?
So masala in Hindi, masala means spice mixture in particular, but in more general terms, it's used as a reference to anything that's a mixture. So we had a store in Winthrop that was attached to the bakery called Mera Masala, and it meant a mixture of things from the valley, basically. That was kind of our take on that term, and it's used oftentimes, you know, it's used frequently as that, just kind of a mixture, a combination of things. All right, how are we all doing with the chole? Are we at a point where we can turn that down and let it just be on simmer for a bit?
Yep.
Looks
Okay,
good.
Judith is good to go. Everybody's good to go. Okay, right on. Let's go ahead and then move into our next recipe then. Are there, but before I do that, let's just make sure, any questions about the chole, any of the processors or the ingredients?
I think it looks good.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to our next dish, which is one of my favorites. I love chutney. So this is a little bit of a different kind of chutney. So chutney is a term that you've probably heard of, and it's kind of a generic term that's used for any kind of condiment that is kind of, I guess it would be the same as like a salsa or something like that, that is used to kind of spice up or add another layer of flavor to any kind of dish. Chutneys can range from fruit-based chutneys, vegetable-based chutneys, to the kind of chutney that we're going to make today, which is a little bit unusual but delicious with this particular dish with the chole. All right. This one is, so we are making coconut chutney. All right, so our ingredients include Greek yogurt. So I opted to use a plant-based Greek yogurt because I was trying to really present this as an option for vegans. If I'm using a milk-based yogurt, I always use unsweetened whole milk Greek yogurt. That's just my preference. You can certainly use a lower fat Greek yogurt as well. The yogurt that I was using for this recipe is an almond milk based yogurt. It to be honest with you, I would not eat it on its own, but it worked really, really well in this recipe. I was actually looking for a coconut milk yogurt. I've had that before, and I really like that, and that would actually work really, really well with this recipe. But any other kind of nut milk yogurt would work. There's the yogurt that is used in a lot of Indian cooking is very similar to Greek yogurt, especially the yogurt that is homemade in India. It's very thick and rich and really rich in protein. Also going to use unsweetened coconut, about a half a cup of that. Coconut is another one of those terrific ingredients. It is really great for anyone who's truly trying to watch their sugar intake. It's got some great sweetness that is really, really nice. And it's actually a really, really healthy ingredient across the board. I really, be sure that when you're looking for coconut, that you get unsweetened coconut and not the flaked coconut. By the way, shredded coconut keeps really well in the freezer. We're gonna, if you'd like, you can add another chili. And again, chili peppers are just full of all kinds of amazing healthful properties, including vitamin C, reducing inflammation, good source of iron and fiber. There are claims that it helps to reduce your appetite. I'm not sure about that one, but I thought I'd throw it in there because I think that's always interesting. And by the way, all of my health benefits come from WebMD and another site that has some Ayurvedic information on these ingredients. We've got Panchporan, which is one of my spice blends. Panchporan is very, very common spice blend in West Bengal, which is where my kids are from. It's used in a variety of ways. The way that we're using it today is quite typical. We're going to be heating it in some oil and cooking those spices just so they kind of pop and the oils, the natural oils of the spices come out. It's also referred to as Indian 5-spice. I make my Panchporan with black mustard seed, which is also quite unique, and it's got a little bite to it. It's not hot, but it's got a little bit more of that mustardy flavor. It's a large seed, and it's very typical in West Bengal. And then the other spices that are used in that one, the whole spices are cumin, fennel, fenugreek, mustard, and then nigella. And if you know nigella is sometimes called black cumin. Nigella has got a very oniony flavor. So it actually, if you take a bite of nigella, it tastes a little bit like a scallion or a green onion. It is very commonly found on as a sprinkle on top of naan in an Indian restaurant. Just delicious. And then we've got our curry leaf. So these are, this is a photo of the curry leaf, which comes from this plant, Muriaia conigi. I don't know how to say that one, but that's the Latin term. And it is, like I said, it is a tree that grows in tropical climates primarily, but it can be grown as a house plant. And there's a photograph of the tree itself with those branches of all those amazing leaves. If you have access to curry leaves, that's a terrific ingredient in this dish. Oops. If you don't have curry leaves, cilantro leaves are also really, really nice. It's a very different flavor profile. And if you don't like cilantro, then don't use that, but that is a nice option. I like to have a little bit of green in this particular dish, so I would encourage you to use either curry leaves or the cilantro leaves. If you want to buy curry leaves, you can certainly order them online. You can also find them at any Indian store on the west side. And then we need a couple tablespoons of a neutral oil. Again, I would say with this particular one, another neutral oil, actually, Judith, I think you were asking about neutral oils. Avocado oil is another one that I like to use. That is really nice and adaptable for Indian cooking. And I think that's the one that I actually used in this particular recipe. You could use coconut oil as well. If you have that on hand, that would be nice. And it would certainly be a nice complement to the other coconut that you've got in this recipe. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get going on this recipe. So we're going to start out with our oil. And we're going to bring that up so that it's not steaming. We don't want it smoky, but we want it to heat up a little bit. And we're going to add our chilies if we're using them. We'll let those start to sizzle just a little bit. And this is a very quick process. We're not cooking. This is not a lengthy process at all. We're adding our dried curry leaf. I usually crumble up my dried leaves, and I didn't in this one, but you can crumble them up with your hand. And then you also add your panch phoron, your spice blend. And we're going to cook this just for a couple of minutes, really. If it feels like it's too dry in your pan, add a splash more oil. It's not a problem. You definitely want it to be, you want the oil to be flavored as well, because that's going to add some nice flavor to your chutney. Now, the curry leaves do absorb the oil, and then they shrink down and kind of break up on their own, but you might want to start out by breaking those up a little bit. And if you're using fresh cilantro leaves, you can just leave those whole. Just make sure that you don't have the stem in there, working with just the leaf. And you can see I used a jalapeno in this one because that's what I had on hand. And it works really well for this as well. I like anything that has just a little bit of heat. But if you don't want any heat in this chutney, it is delicious as a mild chutney as well. It's very cooling. This is a chutney that we eat a lot at home with lamb kofta, which is ground lamb that's spiced. And it can be quite, I actually make it pretty spicy. So it's nice to have a cooling chutney on the side with that. You can
Oh, I
hear
wish I
that.
could smell it.
This smells amazing, Tracy. Yeah, the smell of panch phoron in oil is just ridiculously delicious. Okay, so that's the cooking part of our chutney. So next up, we're going to be mixing our yogurt. And our coconut, our shredded coconut. And then this is the fun part. Right on top of that mixture, we are adding our delicious flavored oil and spices right into that coconut and yogurt mixture. Sometimes when I do this, right when the oil is really hot, it kind of sizzles and it's just so inviting. We're just going to mix that up. And that is it for the chutney. I want to take a minute and just see if there are any questions, or let folks catch up. I can see Judith madly stirring. Ooh. What now, Judith? Did you use dairy yogurt in yours, or did you use a non-dairy?
Non-dairy.
Non-dairy, nice. Okay. Leanne, did you make chutney?
I'm stirring mine.
I'm gonna taste
Oh,
it.
nice.
I did use just the yogurt, Greek yogurt that I had in my refrigerator, so.
Yeah, it works really well. I love it with
Mhm.
dairy yogurt. It's really nice.
Mm. Yum, yum,
Oh yeah, there you go.
yum.
I love hearing everybody's happy sound noises. I'm getting hungry over here.
I know that's the only problem with doing doing a Zoom lesson, right? We can't share in the smells and tastes and all of that. It is
I wish we
Yeah,
could send the smell. They've got to get that technology
I know,
Feels
right?
so-
Yeah.
My
Well, I
dog
was
is
thinking
right
about-
at my side now.
I love that. I think I wish we had like scratch and sniff Zoom, you know, the full experience. All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and move forward. Well, actually, I should just make sure, any questions about the chutney? You can see how easy it is. It truly is very straightforward. And what I found, I will say that I found with this particular chutney, it when I use the dairy yogurt, it lasts really well for probably a minimum of a week in the fridge. With a non-dairy yogurt, I found that the consistency changed over a couple of days. And so it was less appealing after 2 or 3 days. So you can cut that recipe back if you need to, or if you want to, you know, maybe start with a half a cup of yogurt and a quarter cup, if you don't want to have leftovers, because it's, you know, it's hard to eat that much chutney in one sitting. So, but I like to have it, you know, I tend I do a lot of menu planning, and I like to have a little extra to serve, like I said, with certain kinds of meat dishes and other veggie dishes. That one is delicious with saag, which is saag is kind of a generic term for Indian spinach or greens, basically. And that coconut chutney is just delicious with cooked greens. So, any questions?
Could scoop naan in here.
Oh, well, absolutely. It is that good for sure. All right. So this is the product of our effort. We've got chole with our coconut chutney, and that little brown thing there is my take on a roti. When I don't feel like making roti from scratch, roti is a traditional North Indian flatbread. I use whole wheat tortillas because they are delicious. I buy them and have those on hand as an option. And it's just a terrific way to make like little mini wraps if you'd like with the chole. And there it is. Chole with coconut chutney in a roti. All right. All right, so that is our tutorial. Any questions? I see that folks are still cooking, which is amazing. Any questions or comments about any part of the process?
Yes, I just put my peppers and my ginger in for the last 10 minutes and leave that uncovered. Okay.
Yes, I would leave it uncovered on very low heat, like a simmer, and let that steam kind of help thicken up that gravy a little bit. And by the way,
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, this dish is one of those that is even better as a leftover, because those chickpeas absorb all those delicious flavors. So I find that, we'll eat it the first night and it's delicious, but on day 2, it's even better. So
That's what I'm gonna wait, and I'm having all the kids over in a couple days, and I was gonna serve them this. So do you think I should put my ginger and peppers in now, or
yeah,
wait?
I would.
Okay.
Yep, I think you're fine to do that, and then just let it cool down thoroughly before you package it up. But yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Other questions?
I don't know if you can hear me, but unfortunately, I seem to have lost my sound after I froze, so
I can hear you, Tracy.
I can't hear you.
Oh,
We can hear you and see you.
We can hear
Okay,
you.
there must be a button.
Thank you, Teresa. This was really fun.
Let's
Oh, I'm
see.
so
Are
glad.
we done, Teresa?
Yes, I am just, I'm adding my email address into the chat right now. If anybody wants that, if you have any questions or concerns or are interested in spices or whatever, I've just entered that into that chat box. So, let's see. That's it from my end.
It smells yummy in here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Oh,
This was fun.
Thank you, Teresa. That was wonderful.
Thank you,
Great.
Teresa. Delicious.
Oh, I'm so
Thank
glad.
you.
Thank you so much for all of you for participating. I really appreciate it. And thank you for, this was my first Zoom class. And so this was actually also my first video. So I've learned a lot.
It worked out really well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, Tracy and I did a couple of test runs in advance to make sure that I could have control over the video because I wanted to be able to pause and answer questions and chat a little bit. So, and that was really, really helpful to be able to go through that process with her. So thank Tracy too.
Thanks. The slides were
Tracy.
terrific.
All right. Well, if you have, like I said, if you have any questions or comments or any insights, want to know where you can buy ingredients, anything like that, please feel free to email me. I am here and available and love to get people excited about Indian food.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Okay, I unfortunately never got my sound back, and so I'm gonna push the pause on the recording. I'm assuming that it's over. Thank you so much, Teresa. That was amazing. Thanks everyone for joining in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.